My name is Cindy Hansen. I am 35 years old. I have been married to Ethan for 3 years now. My sister Sandra, who is 4 years older than me, lives nearby and visits us often when she has days off. Do you guys not want children? Actually, I found out from a test that I'm not able to get pregnant. I see. I'm sorry. Ethan and I had wanted children from the beginning of our marriage. However, even after 3 years of marriage, we were unable to conceive. After undergoing infertility tests together, it was discovered that the problem lay with me, and I am currently undergoing treatment. Don't worry about it at all. I'm just happy you're here to talk to me. There's still a chance the treatment could succeed. Let's believe in it. Sandra often gives advice and supports me whenever she visits. Her words have always been a great help to me. But one day, I saw Sandra carrying a large bag on her way home from shopping. As I was about to call out to her, Ethan appeared in front of her. What's going on? Confused, I just watched them leave. From that day on, Sandra and Ethan suddenly disappeared from my life. Years passed, and I turned 41. While enjoying a day at the aquarium, I unexpectedly ran into Sandra, who had run off with my husband 6 years ago. Sandra. Hearing my voice, Sandra turned around with a baby in her arms, and Ethan was standing beside her. After a moment of shocked silence, they casually spoke to me as if nothing had happened. Wait, is that you, Cindy? Cindy, have you been well? Have I been well? Where have you been all this time? What have you been doing? Why didn't you contact me at all? As I questioned them angrily, Sandra approached and said, You know already, don't you? Our baby was born. This is your niece. It was clear as I had suspected. Sandra and Ethan had indeed had an affair behind my back and eloped that day. The baby in Sandra's arms has a cute face, having inherited the genes of my beautiful sister and handsome ex-husband. The baby sleeps peacefully, completely innocent. Yet, just looking at the baby's face fills me with anger. You do realize what you've done, right? I glared at Sandra and Ethan as I spoke, and Ethan unrepentantly replied, Forget the past. At first, I couldn't believe that my husband and sister were having an affair. But when they didn't answer my calls and their phones were eventually disconnected, I had to accept that I had been betrayed. The pain, suffering, and sadness until I could accept the truth were immense. I guess you're still not married, am I right? Sandra has always wanted to be superior since we were children. She continued to taunt me without reservation. So, I boldly responded. Let me introduce you, my husband, a lawyer, and your nephew who's now in elementary school. I was supposed to be infertile, weren't I? Sandra and Ethan were confused. The truth is, after they eloped, my infertility treatments were successful, and I had given birth to Ethan's child. It seems the treatment was successful. I found out I was pregnant after you disappeared. I'm currently pregnant with my second child. Wha? Then that child is mine. Huh? No way. Sandra and Ethan looked incredulous. I couldn't believe it either, but it's true. It was right after you left, so the child is now 6 years old. That's really? But don't worry, the child is now my husband's, not yours. What? My son and I have legally adopted each other. So now we are truly parent and child. There's no blood relation. But since we've been together since birth, there's no difference. I met my husband when I was at a loss after being betrayed by Sandra and Ethan. I frequented a cafe that I liked, and my husband, who was also a regular there, started talking to me. When he found out he was a lawyer, I consulted him about my situation. Initially, I intended to claim damages at that time, but I prioritized the child after discovering the pregnancy. Our relationship naturally developed into dating and led to where we are today. I will be the child's father. That was what my husband proposed to me. I'm glad I trusted him when he said blood relation didn't matter. Wow, so you managed to have a child when you had no other choice. Because of your infertility. Anyway, it's true that you're infertile, Cindy. This time was just a fluke, and you might not be able to have children in the future. So take good care of them. It's good that someone is willing to take you, even you. Your husband really has unusual tastes. Sandra seemed unable to accept that the son was Ethan's child, and she disliked seeing my growing belly. My child is cuter than Cindy's, right? This child was born out of love between Ethan and me. That's why they look happier than Cindy's child. Plus, I'm not infertile, so I don't have to worry about whether I can have children. And we're discussing when to have the next one. Maybe your child in your belly was also a fluke. Sandra's pride was as high as ever, continuously hurling what could be considered insults at me. She has always been like this since we were children, thinking she's superior because she's the eldest. If I ever outperformed her, she would taunt and belittle me. It hasn't changed even as adults. She has to be the best even though she's beautiful and smart but shallow. Sandra is still the same. I don't care about your taunts. Just tell me what happened that day 6 years ago. What? What kind of way is that to talk? Why bring this up now? Now? I'm still not satisfied. You two disappeared without a trace and without reason. How would you feel if the roles were reversed? It's impossible to be satisfied without knowing the truth. Sandra began to explain. All right, I'll tell you. But you'll definitely regret hearing it. Ethan left you for me because you were infertile and couldn't have children. He said he wouldn't have married you if he had known about the infertility. Were you actually thinking those awful things? Looking at Ethan, he avoided eye contact and became evasive. Is what Sandra said true? Did you cheat on me because I was infertile? Ethan answered without looking at me. It's true. You were infertile and couldn't have children, so I got fed up and cheated on you. You should have talked to me before having an affair like that. Even if I had talked about it, you wouldn't have agreed, right? What do you mean? I told you many times that I wanted to stop the infertility treatments. But you always said you didn't want to give up on having children, so we continued. But Ethan, you said you wanted children with me, didn't you? Yes, I did, but even when we tried it, nothing happened. Then there was talk of collecting samples for tests and artificial insemination. It didn't feel like normal child-making. I didn't feel the love. Indeed, Ethan initially liked children and was enthusiastic about fertility treatments. At first, we tried to conceive by timing ovulation and improving our diet and lifestyle. But when no signs of pregnancy showed, we proceeded with tests and then discussed artificial insemination. Physical intimacy faded as it became more about collecting samples. Though I accepted this as part of our effort to have children, there seemed to have been a disconnect in our feelings at some point. Remember, Sandra, you said Ethan didn't want to give up on the treatments and believed in their success, right? The chance of success was there, and he encouraged me to believe in it. But maybe that was. As I said this, looking at Sandra, she smirked. I realized I had been manipulated. Sandra, you lied to me. You finally realized. But it's too late. It was a delicate issue, and I couldn't ask Ethan directly, so I relied on you. But actually, Ethan had been suffering from the infertility treatments for a long time. Yet, you told me he felt the same. And kept me from giving up on the treatments, didn't you? Wait, what? Is that true? Yes. That way, Ethan would grow tired of the treatments. And your insistence on continuing would frustrate him. So you knew our true feelings. And enjoyed watching our relationship slowly deteriorate and break? I wasn't enjoying it. But when I told Ethan he could have children with me, he thought it would free him from the pain and chose to go with me. Ultimately, it was Ethan's decision. That may be so, but I didn't hear about Sandra manipulating things behind the scenes. Ethan was disturbed by the truth. Essentially, our marriage broke down because Sandra lied to both of us. While it's true we couldn't directly communicate our feelings, I realized that both of us had faults. My feelings of betrayal were mixed with a sense of shame and sadness. But by any standard, what Sandra did, meddling with her sister's husband, was unacceptable and not something a normal person would do. Weren't you hesitant to go after your sister's husband? Not at all. I fell in love with him, so I thought it couldn't be helped. Someone inexperienced in love like you, Cindy, wouldn't understand, right? Things happen between men and women, and if a relationship can be destroyed by someone else, it probably wasn't solid to begin with. I love Ethan. Someone as handsome as him is wasted on Cindy. A beautiful woman like me suits him better. Sandra, so you cared about me so much that you lied to have me? Sandra said it didn't matter that Ethan was her sister's husband if she fell in love with him. Ethan, who had been shocked by Sandra's schemes, was completely persuaded by her fervent declaration of love. The fact that she would lie to have him showed that neither Sandra nor Ethan were of sound mind. See? I cheated because I was sick of your infertility. It seems you were completely manipulated by my lies. But that just shows how fragile your marriage was. I've always wanted to elope at least once in my life. The thrill of possibly being caught was so exciting. Thanks. Oh. You're not still hung up on Ethan, are you? Even if you are, I'm not giving him up. What? No way. I'm married again and have a little one, so don't group me with you. Now I finally understood the truth about that day 6 years ago. It all started with a drama sparked by lies about our infertility treatments. That cracked our marriage. While I can't forgive my sister for lying, perhaps our relationship was fragile enough to break easily if manipulated by lies. I thought it would have been better if we had been more honest with each other back then, but now we each have separate lives. So I should forget about it. That's when Ethan dropped a bombshell. Cindy's son has a blood connection with me, right? He is legitimately your child. Are you sure about that? If you doubt it, get a test or whatever. But it's a pointless conversation. Pointless? Because my husband is now his father. What would change if you confirmed the blood relation now? My husband and I are here for him, and we aren't planning to ask you for child support. This means we won't be seeing each other again after today. Actually, I always wanted a boy, not a girl. So what? That child is originally mine and Cindy's, so could you give him back? What? I don't understand what you're saying. Ethan apparently wanted a boy. He was now asking for his child back, claiming that since the child was originally his and mine, I should return him. But my son is also my child, and children are not objects to be returned. It's infuriating to see that he isn't considering my son's feelings at all. Ethan, did you want a boy? So this child is unnecessary to you? Sandra asked somewhat angrily. No, it's not like that. I just thought it would be nice to have a boy in the future since that child is my own. Didn't Sandra recently say childbirth was so painful? She didn't want to go through it again? So I thought, why go through that pain again when I already have a son here? Indeed, that might be a good idea. It's annoying that Cindy's blood is connected. But since he's my sister's child, our blood is connected too. Then we'd have a boy and a girl that would complete the family I've envisioned. Sandra agreed with Ethan's absurd idea. My husband and I hadn't said a word, but they were getting carried away as if it was a done deal. Seeing this, my son made a disgusted face at Sandra and Ethan, clutching my skirt and hiding behind me. Then my husband, who had been silent, spoke up. Sorry to interrupt your excitement, but my son is my child. And taking him would be kidnapping. No matter how much blood is connected. I have no intention of entrusting my son to people like you. What? The real father is me, right? You're just a stranger with no blood connection, so keep quiet. No matter how much my husband explained, Ethan wouldn't understand and continued to argue ignorantly. As I've mentioned before, my son and I have adopted each other. So what? That doesn't change the fact that there's no blood connection. Indeed, adopting a child doesn't change whether or not there is a blood relation. However, when you and I divorced, our son was not registered in your family registry. Just because there is a blood relation, it doesn't mean there was a true parent-child relationship when my wife, unmarried at the time, gave birth and then remarried me. Therefore, to become the legal parent of the son who was in my wife's registry, I legally adopted him, and we became legally obligated parents. My son and I are not connected by blood. However, by adopting him, I have taken on the responsibility to raise him. In the family registry and by law, I am recognized as his parent. So, you are just someone who is related by blood. If you were to forcibly take our son now, it would be considered kidnapping because, legally and by registry, the parents are my wife and me. Do you have any questions about this? After my husband finished speaking, Ethan and Sandra were left speechless, unable to respond. I acknowledge the blood relation between you and our son. However, I have been the one by his side since he was born. Do you even know what expression he had when he was born? How much he weighed, or how he is grown up? There may be no blood relation between my son and me, but we have many memories of being together as a parent and child. Family bonds are built gradually over time. Ethan seemed utterly defeated, searching for words but finding none, thinking that just being blood-related would solve everything. Suddenly, our eyes met, and he blurted out, "You say we divorced, but I never handed in a divorce form. You didn't use any illegal means, did you? Desperate to find a fault with us." Ethan suddenly brought up the matter of the divorce form. "Ah, about that. You were the one who wrote it and stored it in the drawer, weren't you? What? You always threatened divorce during our arguments, waving the pre-filled divorce form at me. So, I just finalized it and submitted it to the office." Ethan seemed to have forgotten about that and was taken aback. "Besides, you ran off with your sister and have been living separately for so long that generally, after 2 to 5 years, the marriage is considered to have failed. Either way, we could have divorced." Ethan was frustrated again, having been argued down. Suddenly, Sandra approached our son and said, You're old enough to understand what adults are saying, right? Yes. That man is your real father, and this man is the fake father, Sandra said, pointing at Ethan and then at my husband. What are you suddenly telling the child? Normally, children live with their real fathers. It's rare for someone to live with a fake father like you. Which one do you prefer? Living with the real father or the fake one? Also, your mother and I are real sisters. I'm the older and more beautiful one, don't you think? If you lived with your real father, you could have a beautiful mother like me. Don't you think that would make you very happy? Stop it. Don't say weird things to such a young child and try to make him decide. Sandra had filled our son's head with adult concerns. And he looked displeased at her, just like before. Watching him remain silent, I stroked his head and said, "You don't have to say anything." But then, he suddenly spoke, "Hey, old lady." Old lady? Being called aunt surprised Sandra, but from our son's perspective, a 45-year-old Sandra would indeed seem like an aunt. Technically, she is his aunt, so it's not incorrect. I almost burst out laughing at her reaction. I'm your aunt, not an old lady. Thinking in terms of real or fake is outdated. I heard on TV recently that there are many types of families now. There are kids who can't live with their parents for various reasons. And some are abused even though they have parents. A friend of mine from the facility comes to school. And he loves the staff there because they're kind to him. Is that so? That's good. Sandra was stunned by our son's mature conversation. Growing up watching my husband, our son often imitated him. They say children take after their parents, and perhaps because my husband is calm. Our son is also unusually composed for his age. So I think if that person is happy, that's good. Just because someone is the real father doesn't guarantee happiness. And being a fake father doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. I know we are not blood related, but my dad is very kind. He always plays with me on his days off, helps with homework, and even gives me piggyback rides. My mom makes the best hamburgers and spaghetti in the world. She organizes my backpack, folds the laundry, and prepares my clothes, all very kindly. I love my dad's big hands and my mom's smiling face. I'm happy to be the child of my mom and dad. Our son responded to Sandra's question with a smile, then looked at my husband and me. I love you too. I love you too. As my husband and I told him, he smiled happily. Watching our son's smile, both my husband and I felt cherished. I had been worried about how a child would feel. But children grow up influenced by their parents and their surroundings. Today's children access a lot of information through TV and smartphones. It's impressive to think that he formed his thoughts by watching something on TV. My husband stroked our son's head and addressed Sandra and Ethan. I don't appreciate the strange questions you suddenly asked our son. But do you understand what I've been saying? What's important isn't blood relation, but how you relate to someone. Just appearing and claiming to be a father, when you have no bond at all, is unimaginable. I think this will be our last meeting, but please don't say strange things to our son. Or try anything like kidnapping him in the future. Got it? I'll give up, all right. You don't need to get so heated, it was obviously a joke. But getting heated is what parents do. You're a parent too, right? Try to be more reasonable. Ethan seemed displeased watching the familial bond between my husband and son, who are not related by blood but clearly close. But 6 years had passed. Thinking about what it would have been like if my son had ended up like Ethan chills me. And I'm sincerely grateful that I met my husband. This is a separate matter. What is it? It seems you hurt my wife quite a bit 6 years ago. That was 6 years ago, why bring it up now? You had an affair with my wife's sister. While still married to my wife and eloped suddenly. The sister knew he was her sister's husband and deliberately lied to cause the marriage to fail. When I met my wife, she was pregnant and looked very tired and worn out. The trauma from what you did to her caused her insomnia. Later, she was diagnosed with depression and became unable to work. If I hadn't met her, I don't know what would have happened to her. I cannot forgive you. And I think you should take full responsibility for what happened then. Responsibility? But it's been 6 years, so it's statute barred, isn't it? Yes, you're well informed. We will be filing for damages. So please acknowledge this and make the appropriate payments to my wife. If you can't get this done, taking the infidelity into account, we'll file a lawsuit. You'll file a lawsuit? We don't have the money for a lawsuit. Shall we get a lawyer and discuss this? I don't have money to pay for a lawyer. Then simply acknowledge the damages and pay them. I won't allow you to continue to hurt my wife any further. As I mentioned before, I am a lawyer, and no matter where you hide, I will find you, so you can't escape. My husband, who had been calm until now, was smiling, but his eyes were not laughing. What will you do? I am fine with taking this to court. Ethan and Sandra turned pale and forced a smile, clearly frightened by the prospect of what might happen if they refused. My husband was staring them down. Okay, we will pay the damages. Sandra, acknowledge it and apologize. Fine, we'll pay. Is that so? Upon hearing this, my husband smiled and said, I will send the paperwork later, but first, please apologize to my wife. He demanded that they apologize to me. Although they seemed reluctant, the icy look from my husband overwhelmed them. And they sincerely turned to me and apologized while bowing deeply. I am truly sorry for what happened at that time. I am really sorry. The things you two did are something I can never forgive. No matter how many times you apologize or pay damages, I won't forget. You said you have become parents, right? From now on, try to be decent people and make that child happy. And do not speak of my son to that child. I do not want any involvement with you two ever again, nor do I want our children involved. Stay away from us from now on. Remember what happens if you break your promise to my wife. With that, we left the scene. Onlookers watched as Sandra and Ethan remained bowed in apology. And while I felt a sense of retribution seeing their embarrassment, we walked away. Later, as a result of being sued for damages, Sandra and Ethan had to sell their apartment and moved into a rented house. Ethan lost his position and had his salary reduced at the company, where my husband had previously reported the incident, forcing him to take on multiple jobs. Later, it was decided that my husband would start his own business, and we would move abroad. My husband speaks French, and our son has been fluently speaking French since he was a baby due to early education programs. While the new lifestyle is daunting, we are looking forward to living abroad. And I plan to learn French from them to become fluent myself. Since then, thanks to my husband, I have been able to sleep well without stress or trauma, living each day in peace.